There's certain things in your life where you just remember in vivid detail what happened. And that's one of them, because it's honestly the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying.
There's footage on the internet that was never supposed to see the light of day. There are footages buried for years, while there are also those that exploded online before anyone could stop them.
New at 10, a Northwest Indiana homeowner says if he had been in the basement when a Tesla crashed into his home, he has no doubt he would have died.
But one thing's for sure, none of them were meant to be uploaded. And the first one on this list turned a major city into a disaster zone, and it was all caught on camera. This might be the most visually horrifying footage to ever hit the internet, and it wasn't released by the government or the news. It came from people on the ground who had no idea what was about to happen. On August 4th, 2020, a fire broke out in a port warehouse in Beirut, Lebanon. Civilians started filming, thinking it was just a small accident. But seconds later, a ripped through the city. The shockwave shattered windows, flattened buildings, and left over 200 people dead. And it was all captured from a dozen different angles, in terrifying cinematic detail. It turns out the warehouse was storing 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate, basically industrial, that had been sitting there for years with no proper safety protocols. It was so powerful, it registered as a 3.3. This wasn't supposed to be a public broadcast. It was real people pointing their phones at a fire and accidentally filming one of the deadliest in history. And just when you thought civilian footage couldn't get any more surreal, the next video came straight from inside a Navy fighter jet. You've probably heard about the US government confirming UFOs are real, and this is the footage that forced their hand. Back in 2004, off the coast of San Diego, a Navy pilot locked onto something strange. It was an object, white, oval-shaped, and eerily smooth, darting through the sky at speeds no aircraft on Earth should be able to reach. No wings, no exhaust, no explanation. The pilots couldn't believe what they were seeing. The clip was labeled FLIR-1, a grainy black and white video showing what's now known as the Tic Tac UFO. It stayed hidden inside military databases for over a decade. But in 2017, it leaked. The New York Times published it. And suddenly, the Pentagon had no choice but to confirm it was authentic. This footage was never supposed to reach the public. It wasn't a reveal. It was a leak, and it flipped the entire UFO conversation on its head. But if the government confirming UFOs was shocking, the next entry raised even more questions, because this time the cameras were supposed to actually be on. When Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, the conspiracy theories exploded immediately. The official story said he hanged himself in his jail cell while awaiting trial for sex trafficking. But when the security footage was requested to confirm what happened, it had mysteriously vanished. According to federal investigators, the cameras outside Epstein's cell malfunctioned. The footage from the hallway was unavailable, and the footage from inside the cell was gone. And on top of that, the two guards who were supposed to be monitoring him both fell asleep at the same time, for hours. People were already skeptical about Epstein's connections to powerful figures, but the missing footage only made things worse. And then it got weirder because the FBI later claimed they did find backup footage from a prior incident involving Epstein, only to admit that tape had been preserved by mistake. The public never got to see what happened that night, but the absence of that footage became just as explosive as any leak, because it confirmed what everyone feared. Some things are missing on purpose. And while that footage went missing, the next clip did the exact opposite. It spread in real time, and no one could stop it. This was one of the first times people realized just how dangerous live streaming could be. In 2017, a man named Steve Stevens drove around Cleveland, Ohio, broadcasting live on Facebook. He claimed he was angry over a breakup and blamed a random elderly man for what happened. While still filming, Stevens got out of his car, walked up to 74-year-old Robert Godwin Sr., and shot him point blank in the head. The video wasn't pre-recorded, it wasn't edited, it was live. Millions of people saw it before Facebook had time to pull it down, and for several minutes, it circulated completely uncensored. Police launched a multi-state manhunt, and Stevens later took his own life after being cornered in Pennsylvania. But the damage had already been done. The video had already been downloaded, re-uploaded, and burned into the memory of the internet. Facebook immediately changed its live streaming policies after the incident. But it was too late. The footage had already proven just how fast something horrifying could be uploaded, and how impossible it is to stop once it's out there. That tragedy unfolded in broad daylight, but the next explosion was hidden from the public for years, until someone leaked the truth. After seeing a live-streamed murder unfold in real time, you'd think nothing could top that in shock value. But the next clip, though, was so catastrophic, the Russian government buried it for years, and for good reason. In 2002, the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Russia's largest space launch facility, was preparing to test a Proton-M rocket. It was supposed to be a routine demonstration, but what the cameras captured that day was a full-blown disaster. Seconds after liftoff, the rocket veered sideways, lost stability, and came crashing back down. What followed was a deafening explosion that engulfed the entire launch pad in flames. The official footage from state media was cut off before the impact, but someone on the ground caught the entire thing, from ignition to detonation. You can see engineers running. You can hear the panic. And then it all goes silent, buried under a cloud of smoke and debris. That raw clip was never supposed to get out. It was leaked years later through Russian forums and bootleg DVDs. By then, questions were piling up about safety protocols, government cover-ups, and why Russia never released a full report. It's one of those disasters where the footage was just too real, too explosive for public broadcast. If there's one kind of footage that governments really don't want going public, it's what happens behind the walls of a lab, especially when that lab suddenly explodes on camera. In October 2021, a chemical lab in Beijing was rocked by a massive explosion, and the entire thing was caught on a building security camera across the street. In the footage, you see everything playing out in real time. Workers going about their day, a bright flash through the windows, and then boom, a shockwave that blows debris across the street like paper. Within hours, the footage hit Chinese social media, but it didn't last long. The video was quickly removed from platforms like Weibo and Douyin. Government censors moved fast, but not fast enough. The clip had already been ripped, reposted, and translated for global audiences. That's when the question started. Was it a chemical storage mishap? A research accident? No one ever gave a clear answer, and the lack of information only made the video more disturbing. It was never supposed to be seen, and yet here it was, played on repeat around the world, showing a moment China hoped it could erase. But while this footage was leaked against a government's will, this wasn't a hacker. This wasn't a leak. This was someone live streaming their own death, and the internet watched it unfold in real time. In 2022, a young man in Indiana was live streaming himself driving a Tesla. At first, it looked like a typical influencer flex, music blasting, speed climbing, ego in overdrive. But the speed didn't stop. The Tesla shot past 90, then 100. The driver bragged that the car could handle it. Seconds later, the stream went violently shaky. A scream, a flash of light, and then silence. The footage ended mid-crash, and viewers were left stunned. Some thought it was fake, others thought it was a stunt. But the truth came out fast. The driver had lost control and slammed into a concrete barrier, dying on impact. The video was pulled quickly, but not before clips of it spread across Reddit and Twitter. People argued about whether it was the driver's fault or the car's. But either way, the outcome was the same. A fatal crash captured on video that never should have made it online. And if you thought that was disturbing, the next footage was shown live on national TV and ended in one of the most devastating tragedies in space history. There are moments in history that feel frozen in time, and this is one of them. Because when the Challenger space shuttle lifted off in 1986, millions of people were watching. Parents, students, entire classrooms tuned in to see a school teacher launch into space. 73 seconds later, everything went wrong. The shuttle suddenly exploded mid-air, breaking apart in a massive fireball. The broadcast kept rolling. The cameras didn't cut away. Viewers watched helplessly as the two rocket boosters spiraled off in different directions and pieces of the shuttle fell into the Atlantic Ocean. At first, the announcers didn't even realize what had happened. Neither did the crowd gathered to watch the launch in person. But the silence, the smoke, and the horror that followed said it all. NASA had filmed the launch as usual, but no one anticipated that footage would capture one of the most tragic moments in spaceflight history. It was meant to be inspirational. Instead, it became a permanent reminder of how fragile life and technology really is. But while that broadcast stunned the world on live TV, the next clip came from a doorbell camera and ended up being the key to saving a life. This one isn't just chilling, it's life-saving. In 2019, a woman was walking down a street in Los Angeles when a car suddenly pulled up beside her. A man jumped out, grabbed her, and dragged her screaming into the vehicle. It happened in seconds. But what the kidnapper didn't realize was that a nearby house had a Ring doorbell camera pointing right at the street. The footage is hard to watch. You can hear the woman screaming, begging for help. You see her fighting back. And then the car speeds off. The homeowners reviewed the footage and immediately handed it to police. Within hours, it was on the news. The vehicle was identified, and the suspect was caught not long after. This was one of the first times a viral Ring clip directly helped solve an active kidnapping case. But it also raised big questions about privacy, surveillance, and how much of our lives are being recorded without us realizing it. That video wasn't meant to go public, but in this case, its existence made the difference between vanishing and surviving. And the next piece of footage, it was never meant to be seen either, but when it leaked, it flipped an entire global crisis on its head. Most crash sites are off limits to the public, but this one was filmed before rescue crews even showed up. In July 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 was flying over eastern Ukraine when it suddenly vanished from radar. The plane had been shot down by a surface-to-air missile, and all 298 people on board were instantly. But before authorities could even get control of the site, civilians and pro-Russian separatists arrived first and started recording. The footage that emerged is haunting. Cell phone videos show smoldering wreckage, scattered luggage, and victims' belongings still intact on the ground. Some of the first people to arrive weren't rescue workers, they were looters. And that made the footage even more disturbing. These clips were never intended to be seen by the world, but once they leaked, they sparked international outrage. They contradicted official reports, challenged media narratives, and raised serious questions about who was really behind the... And to this day, that footage remains one of the only unfiltered looks at what really happened to MH17. But while that crash site was exposed by bystanders, the next video came from deep inside a classified government vault and wasn't supposed to resurface for decades. Before Hiroshima, before Nagasaki, there was Trinity, the world's first, and it was filmed, but never meant to be shown. On July 16, 1945, deep in the New Mexico desert, the U.S. military conducted a top-secret test of the... They had set up high-speed cameras around the zone to capture every frame, and what they recorded was something the world had never seen before. An artificial sun rising out of the earth. It was so powerful it vaporized the steel tower it sat on. The fireball expanded faster than the speed of sound. Wave flattened everything for miles. And yet, for decades, that footage was locked away, sealed under military classification. It wasn't until the 1980s that the government began releasing select clips. And even now, most of the original reels are still hidden in archives. The clips we have seen were leaked, copied, restored, and posted online by independent researchers. Grainy, haunting, and real. This wasn't just a test. It was the birth of the age, and the camera caught every second of it. But from atomic bombs to a Hollywood legend, the next footage takes us to a funeral that was never supposed to be filmed at all. Some moments are meant to be private, but that didn't stop this footage from leaking, and once it did, there was no going back. When Bruce Lee died suddenly in 1973 at just 32 years old, it shocked the world. The official cause was listed as cerebral edema, but the mystery surrounding his death only added fuel to the fire. His funeral in Hong Kong was intended to be a closed, respectful event for family, friends, and a few select press outlets. But someone brought a camera and captured everything. The video shows an open casket funeral with thousands of mourners lining the streets. But the most jarring part is the footage of Bruce Lee's body. Dressed in his favorite Chinese suit, lying perfectly still, his face visibly altered from the embalming process. That clip made its way onto bootleg tapes, and eventually the internet turning a deeply personal moment into public spectacle. Lee's family never approved the release, and to this day, it's one of the most controversial celebrity funeral clips ever shared. But while that funeral video leaked after Bruce Lee's death, the next clip shows a tragedy unfolding in real time, in front of a screaming crowd. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not in front of tourists, not during a routine show, and definitely not on camera. In 2010, experienced trainer Dawn Brancheau was performing with an orca named Tilikum at SeaWorld Orlando. The show had just ended. The music had stopped. The audience was starting to file out when suddenly, Tilikum grabbed Dawn by the ponytail and pulled her into the water. What happened next was caught on multiple angles. Staff running, alarms blaring, horrified guests watching as the whale thrashed violently in the pool. The official show footage was quickly confiscated. SeaWorld never released it to the public, but partial clips taken from bystanders and internal recordings began leaking years later. It triggered a media firestorm, lawsuits, investigations, and eventually the documentary Blackfish, which exposed decades of questionable practices behind the scenes. SeaWorld spent millions trying to control the damage, but the footage had already done its job. It showed the public something that was never supposed to be seen, and once they saw it, they couldn't unsee it. And as horrifying as that was, the next video is even darker. A phone recording of a couple who casually confessed to something unthinkable. Most confessions happen in interrogation rooms. This one happened on a cell phone, and it was far more disturbing than anyone expected. In 2017, Russian authorities arrested a couple in Krasnodar after workers at a construction site discovered a discarded phone. On it, selfies and videos showing human remains, body parts, a severed head. One of the clips even showed the man posing with a victim's hand, smiling like it was a trophy. When police raided their apartment, they found preserved in jars, a bag of human skin in the freezer, and recipes for cooking human meat. The couple eventually admitted to killing at least 30 people, though the real number may be higher. The footage wasn't supposed to make it out of police hands, but once it was leaked, it went viral. News outlets blurred the most graphic parts, but the raw clips still circulated online, haunting proof of how casual real horror can be. It wasn't a documentary, it wasn't a film, it was just a phone, passed around like a secret, showing a side of humanity most people wish didn't exist. But while that video was hidden away in a camera, the next one was hidden inside a CIA black site, and when parts of it finally surfaced, it exposed one of the darkest operations in US history. This is the footage you'll never actually see, because the CIA made sure to destroy it. but even its existence was enough to blow the lid off a global scandal. In the early 2000s, the US was running covert detention centers, black sites, where suspected terrorists were interrogated using methods the government refused to call torture. But inside those facilities, everything was recorded. Videotapes showed detainees being waterboarded, slammed against walls, and held in stress positions for hours. In 2005, the CIA admitted to destroying at least 92 of those tapes. They claimed it was for the safety of agents. Critics said it was a cover-up. Years later, a few still images and written transcripts were declassified just enough to confirm the footage had existed, and what it contained was exactly as horrifying as people feared. The videos were never meant to be seen by the public, and now they never will be. But the fact that they were destroyed tells you everything you need to know. And if you think that's the darkest thing ever caught on camera, wait until you hear about what someone secretly recorded at the execution of a dictator. When a dictator is sentenced to death, the world expects official footage, a controlled release, a carefully edited broadcast. That's not what happened here. On December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein, former president of Iraq, was hanged in a Baghdad prison after being convicted of crimes against humanity. The government filmed the execution and released a silent, edited version. But someone inside the room had a different idea. A guard pulled out a contraband cell phone and secretly recorded the entire thing, including the parts that were never supposed to be seen. In the leaked footage, Saddam is taunted by witnesses. You hear shouting, insults, and chaos. The actual moment of execution is brutal, raw, and far more violent than the official version suggested. When the video surfaced online, it sent shockwaves around the world. The Iraqi government was humiliated, officials launched an investigation, and suddenly, what was meant to be a quiet, solemn ending became a viral spectacle, one that sparked riots, death threats, and even more bloodshed. However, this next one hits hard because it captures the exact moment joy turned into terror. On November 13th, 2015, the Bataclan Theater in Paris was packed. A sold-out crowd was watching the Eagles of Death Metal perform live. The band was mid-song. The audience was cheering. People were dancing and filming on their phones when gunfire suddenly erupted from the back of the hall. Armed terrorists stormed the venue and opened fire on the crowd. Screams filled the room. On May 24th, 2022, a gunman entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. 19 children and 2 teachers. The police response was widely criticized, with reports claiming officers waited over an hour before confronting the shooter. For weeks, officials deflected questions. Families demanded answers. And then the hallway video leaked. Captured on school security cameras, the footage shows police officers standing in the hallway armed, armored, and just steps from the classroom where the children were trapped. Some are seen checking their phones. One pumps sanitizer into his hands, but no one moves in. The video was never meant to be released. Law enforcement tried to delay it. But when it surfaced, public outrage exploded. It wasn't just about what was caught on camera, it was about what wasn't done. The footage turned a national tragedy into a full-blown scandal. And even now, that hallway video is a reminder of how silence can be just as loud as gunfire. But as devastating as that was, the final entry on this list is pure chaos, a moment caught on multiple cameras during the deadliest mass shooting in modern US history. It started like any other concert. Music, lights, thousands of people dancing under the Vegas skyline. And then, the gunfire began. On October 1st, 2017, a gunman opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, targeting a crowd attending the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival. Over 1,000 rounds were fired in just 11 minutes. By the time it was over, 60 people were dead, and more than 400. It remains the deadliest mass in American history. And that's a wrap on the wildest footage that was never meant to see the light of day. Which clip had you staring at the screen in disbelief? Let us know your favorite down in the comments. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.